I was seated behind a massive concrete pillar at my own sister's wedding. Everyone in that ballroom pretended I was not family. They looked right through me like I was part of the drywall. Then, a stranger sat beside me in the shadows and whispered, "Just follow my lead and pretend you are my date." When he stood up to speak later that night, everyone turned to look. My sister stopped smiling. The color drained from my mother's face. And for the first time in 35 years, I finally understood what it felt like to be seen. My name is Zara, and at 35 years old, I thought I had grown thick enough skin to handle my family. I was wrong. What happened at the Pierre Hotel in New York City was not just a wedding drama. It was an execution of my dignity. But before I tell you how a stranger and a forensic audit report changed my life forever, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the black sheep in a family that demanded you stay silent. Your support helps me share these stories of resilience. Now let me take you back to that table, or should I say that corner. The Pierre is one of the most expensive hotels in Manhattan. The air smells like old money, expensive perfume, and fresh lilies. But where I was sitting, the air smelled like dish soap and reheating salmon. While the other 300 guests were seated at round tables draped in heavy white linen, with crystal centerpieces catching the light of the chandeliers, I was shoved into a dark alcove next to the service entrance. There was no white tablecloth on my small, rickety table. There was no silverware. There was no crystal glass. There was just a bare wood surface that wobbled every time a waiter kicked the leg while rushing past with trays of hors d'oeuvres. I could hear the clinking of glasses and the murmur of polite conversation from the main floor, but I could not see anything. The pillar in front of me was about 4 feet wide, blocking my view of the aisle, the altar, and the head table. I was the bride's sister, and I was seated in the overflow section, usually reserved for vendors or last-minute additions. I sat there in my emerald green dress, clutching my purse, trying to control the shaking of my hands. I looked down at the table, hoping to find a place card, maybe an apology, maybe a mistake. But there was only a sticky note. A bright pink neon sticky note that looked violent against the dark wood. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was loopy, bubbly, and chaotic. It was Jasmine's handwriting. The note read, "Zara, please sit here and help manage the kitchen flow. The main tables were fully booked with VIPs, plus your dress color is a bit dark and it clashes with the aesthetic I want for the live stream. Do not wander around too much. Love, Jasmine." I read the note twice. The first time I felt a sting in my eyes. The second time, I felt a cold, hard stone settle in my stomach. It was not about the space. A ballroom at the Pierre does not run out of space for the sister of the bride. And it was not about the kitchen flow. I am a forensic accountant, not an event planner. It was about the aesthetic. I ran a hand over my hair. It was styled in a twist-out, full and voluminous, sitting like a halo around my head. My skin is deep, rich mahogany. Jasmine, my younger sister, is different. She has what our mother calls the lucky genes. Her skin is light caramel, like a latte with extra milk. Her hair has always been chemically straightened since she was 5 years old, falling down her back in silken sheets. This sticky note was not just a seating arrangement. It was a reminder of my place in the hierarchy of the Washington family. Sit there in the shadows, the sounds of the string quartet drifting over from the invisible celebration. I felt myself being pulled back. The smell of the industrial dish soap from the kitchen suddenly smelled like the burning of hair grease and hot metal on a Sunday morning in our kitchen in Brooklyn. I was 10 years old, sitting on the floor between my mother's knees. My neck ached from how hard she was pulling. "Hold still, Zara," my mother snapped, tapping my scalp with the hot comb. Her voice was sharp, not affectionate. "Why is your hair so difficult? It is like wrestling with steel wool. I swear you got all the bad traits from your father's side." I bit my lip, trying not to cry as the heat radiated too close to my ear. I looked across the living room. Jasmine, who was only 5, was sitting on the velvet sofa. She was wearing a pink frilly dress, watching cartoons. Her hair was already done, smooth and shiny, with a perfect white bow perched on top. She looked like a doll. She looked effortless. "Mom, why does Jasmine get to watch TV?" I asked, my voice small. "Because Jasmine sat still," my mother said, applying more grease to my scalp. "And because her hair behaves. Your sister is going to be someone, Zara. Look at her. She has the look. You need to learn to work hard because you are not going to get by on just a pretty face." I remember looking at my little sister and feeling a confused mix of love and jealousy. It was not Jasmine's fault, but the message was clear even then. Jasmine was the prize. I was the labor. Jasmine was the artwork to be displayed. I was the infrastructure meant to be hidden in the walls, holding things up but never seen. Over the years, that dynamic never shifted. It only solidified like concrete. When we lost our family home in Brooklyn and moved to a smaller apartment, I was the one who took extra shifts at the library to buy groceries, while Jasmine needed money for modeling classes. When I got a full scholarship to college, my mother said it was good because we need to save the college fund for Jasmine. She is going to need help. And now, here I was, 35 years old, a successful professional, respected in my field, sitting behind a pillar because my skin tone might mess up the lighting on an Instagram live stream. I looked back at the pink sticky note. "Do not wander around too much." A burst of laughter erupted from the main room. I could hear my mother's voice, shrill and excited. She was probably holding court, telling everyone how proud she was of her beautiful daughter marrying a wealthy venture capitalist. She was probably accepting compliments on her dress, which I had paid for, because Jasmine had maxed out her credit cards 2 weeks ago. I took a deep breath and reached into my purse to pull out my phone. I wanted to leave. I wanted to stand up, walk out the service entrance, and never look back. But I couldn't. Not yet. There was something I needed to witness. There was a reason I had agreed to come today, despite the insults, despite the exclusion. I was checking my email, specifically a report from my private server, when a shadow fell over my table. I looked up, expecting to see a waiter, maybe someone coming to tell me I was blocking the fire exit. Instead, there was a tall white woman standing there. She was draped in a silver sequined gown that probably cost more than my first car. She was holding a dirty napkin and a half-empty glass of champagne that had lipstick stains on the rim. She wasn't looking at my face. She was looking at the empty table space next to my elbow. "Here you go," she said, her voice breezy and dismissive without making eye contact. "Can you take this? And find someone to bring more napkins to table 12. We spilled some wine." She thrust the dirty glass toward me. I froze. I was wearing an emerald silk evening gown. I was wearing diamond earrings. I was clearly a guest, but to her, sitting in the shadows behind a pillar next to the kitchen, I was just staff. I was invisible labor. For a second, I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and tell her I probably made more money in a month than she did in a year. I wanted to slap the glass out of her hand. But then I saw my mother. Patricia Washington was walking past, glancing toward the kitchen, probably to harass the catering staff. She saw the woman handing me the trash. She saw the humiliation painted on my face, and she did not step in. She did not say, "Excuse me, that is my daughter." She did not say, "She is a guest." My mother made eye contact with me. Her eyes were cold warning. She made a subtle gesture with her hand, a quick flick of the wrist that meant, "Just do it." "Don't make a scene," she mouthed silently. "Don't embarrass Jasmine." The betrayal hit me harder than the stranger's rudeness. My own mother preferred to let me be treated like a servant than risk an awkward moment at her golden child's wedding. I felt my throat close up. The woman was still holding the glass out, waiting. "Miss," the woman said, impatient now, "take it." I slowly reached out my hand, trembling with rage. I was about to take the dirty glass. I was about to accept my role as the invisible garbage can of this family. I was about to shrink into the floor and disappear, just like they wanted. That was when a hand reached out from the darkness behind me. It was a large hand, warm and firm, with manicured nails and a heavy gold watch peeking out from the cuff of a black suit. The hand gently pushed mine down, intercepting the glass. "I do not think she will be taking that." The voice was deep, smooth, and vibrated with a quiet authority that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "But I am sure the busboy will be around shortly. Now, if you will excuse us, we are in the middle of a private conversation." The woman in the silver dress gasped, pulling her hand back like she had been burned. She blinked, trying to see who had spoken from the shadows. I turned my head. Sitting in the chair next to me, a chair I hadn't even realized was occupied, was a man. He was black, older, maybe mid-40s, with salt and pepper woven into his beard. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him so perfectly it looked like a second skin. He was holding a tumbler of amber liquid that definitely did not come from the open bar. He wasn't looking at the woman. He was looking at me. His eyes were dark, intense, and seeing everything. He didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with recognition. "Sit up straight, Zara," he whispered, so only I could hear. He poured a small amount of his drink into the empty water glass on my table. "You are looking at the floor when you should be looking at the exits." "Who are you?" I whispered back, my heart hammering against my ribs. He took a sip of his drink and leaned back in the rickety chair, making it look like a throne. "I am the person who is going to make sure you have a front row seat when this house of cards comes crashing down. Drink up. The show is just starting." From the main room, the DJ announced the entrance of the happy couple. Cheers erupted, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking at the party. I was missing. I was looking at the stranger who knew my name and wondering why the most powerful man in the room was sitting behind a pillar with me. The woman in the silver dress was still holding the dirty glass out to me, her eyebrows raised in impatient expectation. My hand was frozen halfway between my lap and the table. I was waiting for my mother to correct her. I was waiting for Patricia Washington, the woman who claimed to be the matriarch of our family, to step in and say, "Actually, that is my eldest daughter. She is a forensic accountant, not a busboy." But Patricia did not step in. Instead, she took 2 quick steps toward me, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. She leaned in close, invading my personal space with the scent of heavy gardenia perfume that she wore like armor. Her eyes were hard, devoid of any warmth or recognition of the humiliation unfolding right in front of her. "Just take it, Zara," she hissed, her voice low and venomous, barely audible over the string quartet playing softly in the distance. "Do not make a scene. Today is the most important day of your sister's life. Do not be the black sheep that brings a dark cloud over her sunshine. Just take the glass and make yourself useful for once. The words hit me like physical blows. Black sheep, dark cloud. These were not new insults. I had heard variations of them my entire life, usually whispered in kitchens or shouted behind closed doors. But hearing them here, in the middle of a ballroom at the Pierre, while a stranger treated me like help, broke something inside me. I looked at my mother. I really looked at her. She was wearing a champagne-colored gown that was too tight around the waist, trying desperately to cling to a youth that had long since faded. Around her neck hung 3 strands of pearls that shimmered under the chandelier light. To the rest of the room, to the wealthy guests and the groom's family, those pearls signaled status. They signaled old money and refined taste. But I knew better. I knew they were high-end replicas she had bought from a contact in Chinatown 3 years ago because she had spent the mortgage money on a cruise. I knew the clasp was gold-plated, not solid gold. I knew that beneath the veneer of sophistication, Patricia Washington was a fraud held together by hairspray and denial. And she was looking at me with pure disdain because I was the only one who saw the cracks. I was the mirror she hated looking into. I swallowed the lump of rage forming in my throat. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to scream that I had paid for the deposit on this ballroom. I wanted to tell the woman in the silver dress to clean up her own mess. But I didn't. Decades of conditioning are hard to break in a single second. The instinct to protect the family image, to shield us from the judgment of outsiders, was woven into my DNA. I slowly reached out and took the dirty glass from the woman. "Thank you," the woman said, already turning away, dismissing me as if I had ceased to exist the moment I served my purpose. I held the glass, feeling the cold condensation seep into my palm. My mother let out a breath she had been holding, her shoulders relaxing. She didn't say thank you. She didn't apologize. She simply adjusted her fake pearls, pasted a wide, beaming smile onto her face, and turned back to the crowd. "Oh, Mrs. Vanderwall," she called out, her voice suddenly dripping with honey and charm as she waved at a guest across the room. "You simply must try the crab cakes. They are divine." I watched her walk away, sashaying into the crowd, blending perfectly into the world of illusion she loved so much. I was left alone in the shadows, holding another person's trash. I set the glass down on a passing waiter's tray. He looked at me with confusion, seeing my emerald gown and diamond earrings, trying to reconcile my appearance with my location next to the service entrance. I didn't explain. I couldn't. I turned around and retreated back to my seat behind the concrete pillar, my sanctuary, my prison. I sat down heavily, the wooden chair creaking beneath me. The noise of the party seemed to swell, a wall of laughter and clinking crystal that I was explicitly excluded from. I pulled my phone out again, my thumb hovering over the Uber app. I could just leave. I could walk out the side door, catch a ride back to my apartment in Brooklyn, order takeout, and forget this entire circus. Why was I staying? Was it hope? Was it masochism? I stared at the back of the pillar, tracing the rough texture of the paint with my eyes. I stayed because leaving would mean they won. Leaving would prove my mother right, that I didn't belong, that I couldn't hack it in their world. I stayed because some small, broken part of me was still waiting for someone to notice I was missing. That was when the light shifted. A shadow fell across my tiny table, longer and broader than the waiters who usually rushed past. I didn't look up immediately. assuming it was another guest looking for the restroom or a staff member coming to tell me I was sitting in a fire lane.
Is this seat taken?
The voice was deep, resonant, and calm. It didn't have the frantic, high-pitched energy of the wedding guests. It sounded grounded. I looked up. Standing there was a man who looked like he had just walked out of a magazine spread, but not the flashy kind Jasmine read. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out a black suit cut so precisely it had to be bespoke. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo like the groomsmen. He was wearing a dark charcoal suit with a crisp white shirt, open at the collar, no tie. It was a look that said he didn't need to follow the dress code because he owned the room. His skin was a deep, rich brown, darker than mine, and his hair was cut close, with distinguished flecks of gray at the temples. He held a crystal tumbler in one hand, the amber liquid inside catching the dim light. I looked around, thinking he must be talking to someone behind me, but there was no one else in the alcove, just me and the service door. I don't think you want to sit here, I managed to say, my voice sounding raspy. This is the overflow section. The view is concrete. He didn't laugh. He didn't sneer. He just looked at the empty, rickety chair next to me, then back at the pillar blocking the view of the stage. Looks like the best seat in the house to me, he said. Quiet, private, and far away from the speeches. Without waiting for my permission, he pulled out the chair. He moved with a deliberate grace, sitting down and stretching out his long legs. He seemed completely unbothered by the fact that he was sitting in the dark, next to the kitchen, with the bride's outcast sister. I stared at him, bewildered. Who are you? I wanted to ask. Why aren't you at the VIP tables? He placed his glass on the wobbly table, his heavy gold watch clinking softly against the wood. Then, he reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. I tensed, instinctively tracking the movement, my training as an auditor making me hyper-aware of hidden objects. He pulled out a silver flask. It was sleek, unbranded, and looked heavy. He unscrewed the cap, the smell of expensive, smoky whiskey drifting through the air, masking the scent of the dish soap from the kitchen. He looked at the empty water glass sitting on my table, the only glassware I had been given. Without a word, he poured a generous amount of whiskey into my glass. Then he poured a little more into his own tumbler. He slid the glass toward me across the rough wood. "Drink up," he said, his eyes meeting mine. They were dark, intelligent, and held a flicker of something that looked dangerously like understanding. "You look like you need it more than I do. And trust me, you are going to want a stiff drink for what comes next." I took the glass. My hand was steady now, grounded by the unexpected presence of the man sitting next to me in the dark. I took a sip. The whiskey was smooth, smoky, and tasted like peat and old wood. It burned on the way down, but it was a good burn, a cleansing burn. It felt like it was cauterizing the wound my mother had just inflicted. I did not say thank you. I got the feeling the stranger did not want gratitude. He wanted an accomplice. He swirled the amber liquid in his own glass, his eyes scanning the ballroom with a predatory calmness. He was not looking at the people as guests. He was looking at them as data points. He watched the way the waiters moved, the way the light hit the jewelry on the women's necks, the way the groom's father was sweating despite the air conditioning. "You have been sitting back here for 20 minutes, he said, his voice low, barely rising above the hum of the room. "You have been watching everything. Tell me, what do you see?" I lowered my glass, looking at him. His question was not idle small talk. It felt like a test. "I see a wedding," I said carefully. "I see my sister getting what she always wanted." He shook his head slightly, a small, dismissive motion. "Look deeper. You are not just a sister. I saw how you looked at that woman's dress before she handed you her trash. You evaluated the fabric. I saw how you looked at your mother's pearls. You know things. So tell me, how much do you think this little performance is costing?" I turned my eyes back to the room. The habit kicked in instantly. It was a reflex I had honed over 10 years of forensic accounting, digging through ledgers and finding the lies hidden in the numbers. I didn't see a party. I saw a spreadsheet. I took a breath, letting the whiskey loosen the knot in my chest. "The flowers are cymbidium orchids, imported from Thailand," I said, my voice gaining a sharp analytical edge. "They are out of season, which triples the price. At $500 a centerpiece for 50 tables, plus the floral arch and the bridal bouquet, you are looking at $40,000 just for the plants that will be dead by tomorrow morning." The stranger raised an eyebrow, but he didn't interrupt. He gestured for me to continue. "The venue," I went on, pointing slightly with my glass. "The Pierre Grand Ballroom on a Saturday night in June. There is a 2-year waiting list. To jump the line like Jasmine did requires a premium rush fee. The rental alone is $60,000. Catering is $300 a head for 300 guests. That is $90,000 for food and alcohol. The band is the Midnight Orchestra. I recognize the lead violinist. They do not get out of bed for less than $25,000. I paused, doing the mental math that was second nature to me. Add in the lighting, the custom dance floor decal, the videography team, and the incidentals. You are looking at a grand total of roughly $250,000. Maybe $260 if they went for the premium open bar package, which, judging by the label on the champagne bottles, they did. The man whistled softly, a low, impressed sound. 250 grand. That is a lot of money for a family that just sold their ancestral home to pay for it. He knew. The realization made me stiffen, but I didn't stop. I was on a roll now. The analysis was a shield. As long as I was crunching numbers, I didn't have to feel the hurt. "But here's the interesting part," I said, leaning in closer to him, our heads almost touching in the shadows of the pillar. "The math does not add up." "How so?" he asked, his dark eyes twinkling with amusement. I nodded toward the front of the room, where Hunter, the groom, was standing near the altar, laughing with his best man. "Look at Hunter. Look at his feet." The stranger narrowed his eyes, focusing on the groom's shoes. "He is wearing Christian Louboutin loafers," the stranger noted. "Red bottoms. Very flashy." "They are fakes," I said flatly. The stranger turned to look at me, genuine surprise on his face. "How can you tell from 50 feet away?" "Because real Louboutin lacquer has a specific gloss index. Under these halogen lights, it should reflect, not absorb. But more importantly, look at the heel structure. His weight is rolling outward. Those shoes have no arch support because the shank is made of plastic, not steel. And if you look really closely at the left shoe, right near the toe, there is a scuff. The red is peeling, revealing black rubber underneath. Authentic red bottoms reveal leather when they scuff." I took another sip of whiskey, the warmth spreading through my limbs. "He is wearing a $5,000 tuxedo, but he is walking in $100 knockoffs. That tells me he cares about the image of wealth, but he lacks the liquidity to support it. A man who spends $250,000 on a wedding does not skimp on his shoes unless he is maxed out." I scanned the rest of Hunter's ensemble, dissecting him like a frog in a biology class. His watch is a Rolex Daytona, but the sweep of the second hand is too rigid. It ticks. A real Rolex glides. That is another fake. And see how he keeps tapping his back pocket? He is checking for his phone. He has checked it 6 times in the last 3 minutes. That is the behavior of a man waiting for a wire transfer to clear. I looked the stranger dead in the eye. My assessment? He is not just broke. He is underwater. I would bet my entire portfolio that he is carrying at least $50,000 in credit card debt just to keep the lights on today. This wedding is not a celebration. It is a desperate attempt to look solvent to potential investors. Silence stretched between us for a moment. The stranger looked at me, really looked at me, as if he was seeing me for the first time. The amusement in his eyes was gone, replaced by a profound respect. "You are not a freelancer, are you, Zara?" he asked quietly. "You are a shark." I shrugged, a bitter smile touching my lips. "I am just the sister who sits behind the pillar." "You are the smartest person in this room," he corrected, "and it is a crime that they have you sitting in the dark." Just then, a group of guests walked past our alcove. It was Hunter's aunt and 2 of her cousins. They were tall, blonde, and wore the kind of pastel dresses that looked innocent, but cost a fortune. They slowed down when they saw us. Their eyes darted from me to the stranger, then back to me. I saw the judgment form instantly. To them, we were not 2 people having a conversation. We were a spectacle. A black woman in an emerald dress and a black man in a power suit, huddled together in the shadows, drinking from a flask. I heard the aunt whisper loudly to her niece, "Look at that. Can you believe it?" The niece giggled behind her hand. "I know. So trashy. Picking up men in the corner at her own sister's wedding? I heard she is single. Desperate behavior." They didn't lower their voices. They didn't care if we heard. In their world, we were background characters, barely sentient enough to have feelings. "Is she soliciting him?" the aunt whispered again, her nose wrinkling in disgust. "Someone should tell security. It makes the whole event look cheap." I flinched. The word soliciting hung in the air like a foul smell. It was a coded word, a heavy word. It stripped me of my profession, my dignity, and my humanity in one breath. I gripped the glass so hard I thought it might shatter. The stranger moved before I could. He shifted his body, angling himself so that he blocked their view of me completely. He didn't say a word to them. He didn't acknowledge their existence. He simply created a wall with his broad shoulders, shielding me from their poison. "Ignore them," he said, his voice hard as granite. "They are ghosts, Zara. They are walking dead people. They just do not know it yet. Their opinion of you is irrelevant because by the time the sun rises tomorrow, they will be too busy calling their lawyers to worry about who you were talking to." He poured a little more whiskey into my glass, a silent offering of solidarity. "Why are you being so nice to me?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," he said. "I know what it is like to be the smartest person in the room and be treated like the help. I know what it is like to build a kingdom and have people question if you stole the bricks." He looked at his watch, the heavy gold one that I knew without asking was real. It was a Patek Philippe, worth more than Hunter's entire fake life. He capped his flask and slipped it back into his pocket. The MC's voice boomed over the speakers, overly enthusiastic and dripping with synthetic joy. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The moment we have all been waiting for is about to begin. Please turn your attention to the main stage for the speeches from the happy couple. The lights in the ballroom dimmed, casting long, dramatic shadows across the floor. The spotlight swung wildly, searching for the bride and groom. The energy in the room shifted from cocktail chatter to performative attention. The stranger turned to me. He didn't smile, but his eyes were bright with anticipation. He looked like a general watching his troops move into position. "Finish your drink, Zara," he said softly. "The play is beginning, and I have a feeling the third act is going to be spectacular." The house lights dimmed further until the ballroom was bathed in a soft, romantic purple haze. A spotlight snapped on, cutting through the darkness and illuminating the center stage where my sister Jasmine and her new husband Hunter stood. They looked like a cake topper come to life. Jasmine was radiant in her $20,000 Vera Wang gown, the crystals catching the light with every breath she took. Hunter stood beside her, tall and blonde in his tuxedo, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. From my seat behind the concrete pillar, I had to lean awkwardly to the left just to get a clear line of sight. Beside me, Julian shifted his chair slightly, giving me a few more inches of space. He didn't look at the stage. He looked at me, watching me watch them. Hunter took the microphone first. His hand was shaking. It was a subtle tremor, barely noticeable to the untrained eye, but to me, it was screaming. He gripped the mic stand with white-knuckled intensity, as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. "Jasmine," he began, his voice cracking slightly before he cleared it. "My beautiful Jasmine. From the moment I met you, I knew I wanted to give you the world." A chorus of ahs rippled through the room. The bridesmaids dabbed at dry eyes with silk handkerchiefs. My mother, sitting in the front row, beamed, clutching her chest as if her heart might burst from pride. "I promise," Hunter continued, gaining a little more confidence as he recited the script he had likely rehearsed in the mirror for weeks. "I promise to treat you like the queen you are. I promise to build an empire for us. With my business growing and our future ahead of us, you will never have to worry about a single thing. You will have the finest clothes, the biggest houses, and a life of absolute luxury." I took a sip of whiskey, letting the burn settle in my stomach. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Hunter wasn't looking at Jasmine when he promised her an empire. His eyes were darting around the room, scanning the back exits. He was sweating profusely. A single bead of perspiration rolled down his temple and disappeared into his collar. Under the harsh spotlight, his skin looked clammy. I leaned closer to Julian, keeping my voice low. "He is terrified," I whispered. "Look at his carotid artery. The pulse is visible from here. He is running at about 120 beats per minute. That is not love. That is a fight or flight response." Julian nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the groom. "He is looking for someone," Julian observed. "See how his gaze keeps snapping to the service entrance?" I followed Hunter's line of sight. Sure enough, every time the double doors swung open to admit a waiter with a tray, Hunter flinched. He wasn't looking for a guest. He was looking for a process server. Or maybe a loan shark. "He promised her luxury," I murmured, more to myself than to Julian. "But he is terrified that someone is going to walk through those doors and repossess the tuxedo off his back." On stage, Hunter finished his vows with a shaky promise of eternal devotion and financial security. He wiped his sweaty palm on his pants before taking Jasmine his hand. The crowd applauded wildly, oblivious to the panic radiating off the groom. They only saw the surface. They saw a handsome man making big promises. They didn't see the fraud. Then it was Jasmine's turn. She took the microphone with the ease of someone who believes the world revolves around her. She didn't shake. She didn't sweat. She basked in the spotlight, turning slightly so her best angle faced the videographer. "Oh, Hunter," she gushed, her voice breathless and practiced. "I am so lucky. We are so lucky." She paused for dramatic effect, looking out over the crowd. "I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate our love," she said. "I want to thank my amazing parents, Patricia and Robert. Mom, thank you for teaching me that I deserve nothing but the best. Thank you for always believing in my dreams and for sacrificing so much to give us this beautiful night." My mother stood up, blowing kisses to the stage. The spotlight swung to her for a moment and she preened, soaking up the attention. "I want to thank my bridesmaids," Jasmine continued, gesturing to the row of women in pink. "My ride or die girls, you have been my rock through all the planning. I do not know what I would have done without you." She went on listing people. She thanked her spin instructor. She thanked her hairstylist. She thanked the wedding planner. She even thanked the college roommate she hadn't seen in 5 years. She listed everyone, except me. I sat in the dark, my hand tightening around the whiskey glass. I wasn't surprised, but it still stung. It was a specific kind of erasure that only families can inflict. I was the one who had stayed up until 3 a.m. helping her address invitations because her handwriting was too messy. I was the one who had negotiated the contract with the caterer, saving them $5,000. I was the one who had driven her to 4 different states to find that dress. And now, I didn't exist. The master of ceremonies, a jovial man with a thick mustache, stepped up to the mic as Jasmine paused for breath. He clearly noticed the omission. He probably had a list of family members to acknowledge and realized one was missing. "And let us not forget the maid of honor," the MC said cheerfully, trying to be helpful. "Or rather, the sister of the bride. I believe her name is Zara? Is Zara in the house? Let us give her a round of applause." The room went silent for a split second. The spotlight swept across the VIP tables, searching for me. It didn't find me. It swept across the middle of the room. Nothing. Jasmine frozen for a moment, before her face twisted into a tight, condescending smile. She laughed, a high tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, silly me," she said into the microphone, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I almost forgot. Yes, Zara is here somewhere." She shaded her eyes with her hand, pretending to look for me in the back of the room. "She is actually sitting in the back near the kitchen," she announced to 300 people. Heads turned, necks craned. The spotlight finally found me, sitting behind the concrete pillar next to the service door. I felt the heat of the light hit my face, exposing me in my exile. "You know how Zara is," Jasmine continued, holding the room captive. "She is not really a party person. She prefers to be in the background." She giggled again, looking directly at me across the room. "Thank you, Zara, for helping manage the logistics back there," she said. "You have always been so good at manual labor. Someone has to make sure the waiters do their jobs, right?" The room erupted in laughter. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was a laugh of relief. The guests laughed because Jasmine had given them permission to treat me as less than. By framing me as help, she had justified their earlier rudeness. She had confirmed that I belonged near the kitchen, not at the head table. My mother was laughing the hardest. She clapped her hands, nodding to the woman next to her as if to say, "Yes, that is Zara. Always the worker, never the queen." The humiliation washed over me like ice water. Manual labor. That was how she saw my career. That was how she saw my life. I was a forensic accountant who brought down corrupt CEOs, but to my sister, I was just a glorified janitor. I felt my face burning. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to stand up, throw the glass against the wall, and storm out. But I couldn't move. I was frozen by the sheer weight of their mockery. Jasmine smiled, satisfied with her little joke, and turned back to Hunter. The spotlight finally moved off me, leaving me blinded and blinking in the sudden darkness. I stared at the table, my vision blurring. The whiskey in my glass trembled. I felt small. I felt like the 10-year-old girl with the unmanageable hair sitting on the floor while her sister sat on the velvet sofa. No matter how much money I made, no matter how much success I achieved in their eyes, I would always be the help. "I am leaving," I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. "I cannot do this." I started to push my chair back, ready to flee into the night, but a hand stopped me. Julian reached out and placed his hand over mine. His skin was warm against my cold fingers. He didn't grip me hard. It wasn't a restraint. It was an anchor. He covered my hand completely, his large palms shielding my trembling fingers. The weight of his hand was steady, grounding me back to reality. "Don't you dare move," he said, his voice low and dangerous. I looked at him, startled by the intensity in his tone. He wasn't looking at me with pity. He was looking at the stage with a cold, calculating fury that made him look terrifyingly powerful. "If you leave now, they win," he said. "If you run, they will tell this story for the rest of their lives. They will say you ran away because you were jealous. They will say you caused a scene because you couldn't handle your sister's happiness. Do not give them that narrative." "But I cannot stay here and be their punchline," I hissed, tears threatening to spill. "You are not the punchline, Zara," he said, turning his dark eyes to meet mine. "You are the twist ending." He squeezed my hand gently, a pulse of strength flowing from him to me. "Look at them," he commanded, gesturing with his chin toward the stage where Jasmine and Hunter were now cutting the cake. "Look at how happy they think they are. Look at how safe they feel in their arrogance." He picked up his flask and poured another splash of whiskey into my glass, his movements calm and precise. "Patience," he whispered. He leaned in closer, his lips just inches from my ear so no one else could hear. "The best revenge is not a scream, Zara. It is a silence. It is sitting still and letting them dig their own graves while you hold the shovel." He tapped the screen of the iPad that was resting inside his jacket pocket. "I have the file ready," he said, "but we wait. We wait until they feel invincible. We wait until the height of their joy so the fall destroys them completely." He looked at me, expecting me to understand, and I did. I took a deep, shaky breath. The tears that had been threatening to fall receded, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He was right. Running away was what the old Zara would do, the Zara who wanted their approval. But that Zara died the moment my sister turned a room full of strangers against me for a laugh. I turned my hand over beneath his, lacing my fingers through Juliana's. It was a bold move, one that surprised even me, but I needed his strength. I needed to borrow his armor until I could forge my own. I looked at the stage. I looked at Jasmine feeding cake to Hunter while he checked his watch for the 10th time. I looked at my mother, laughing with her fake pearls. "Okay," I whispered, my voice steady now. "We wait." Julian smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a wolfish smile. "Good girl," he said. "Now drink your whiskey. The toast is coming up, And I have a feeling the champagne is going to taste like ashes in their mouths very soon. I lifted the glass to my lips, my eyes locked on my sister. Patience. Revenge is a dish best served cold. And in this air-conditioned ballroom, I was freezing. The whiskey Julian had given me was sitting warm and heavy in my stomach, giving me a kind of liquid courage I was not used to. But the air in the ballroom was getting stifling. Every time I breathed in, I smelled the heavy floral arrangements and the even heavier scent of hypocrisy. I needed a moment. I needed silence. I needed to splash cold water on my face and remind myself that I was Zara Washington, the woman who could track a hidden offshore account through 20 layers of shell companies, not Zara the unwanted sister. I excused myself from the table, giving Julian a small nod. He didn't say anything, just tapped his finger once against the side of his glass. A silent signal to stay sharp. I walked toward the ladies' lounge, keeping my head down, avoiding eye contact with the guests who were now happily buzzing with champagne. The restroom at the Pierre was not just a bathroom. It was a sanctuary of marble and gold leaf. The lighting was soft and flattering, designed to make you look expensive even if you felt cheap. The air smelled of fresh lavender and expensive soap. I pushed open the heavy door, and thankfully, it was empty. The silence wrapped around me like a blanket. I walked to the sink, gripping the cold marble counter with both hands, staring at my reflection in the massive, gilt-framed mirror. My eyes looked tired, but there was a fire in them that hadn't been there an hour ago. My hair, the hair my mother hated, was framing my face in a cloud of soft curls. I looked strong. I looked like someone who could survive this. I moved into the furthest stall, locking the door behind me. I didn't actually need to use the facilities. I just needed to sit in a space where no one could look at me with pity or disdain. I leaned my head back against the partition and closed my eyes, taking deep, steady breaths. 1, 2, 3. Just as I was about to unlock the door and head back out into the fray, the main door to the lounge banged open. It wasn't a gentle entrance. It was a frantic, hurried invasion, accompanied by the aggressive clicking of heels and the rustle of heavy fabric. Oh my God, get this door shut. Hurry up! The voice was unmistakable. It was Jasmine, but the sweetness she had used on stage, the breathy adoration she had projected toward Hunter, was completely gone. In its place was the shrill, demanding tone I had grown up with, the tone that meant she wanted something, and she wanted it now. I froze. My hand hovered over the latch. I knew I should announce my presence. I knew I should cough or shuffle my feet. But something stopped me. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the auditor in me knowing that people are only truly honest when they think no one is listening. I heard the sound of a lock clicking on the main door. She had locked out other guests. This was a private council of war. "My feet are killing me," Jasmine groaned. The sound of shoes being kicked off echoed against the tile. "Seriously, Tiffany, help me out of these things." I told Hunter I needed the custom Louboutins with the wider toe box, but of course he messed it up. He messes everything up. Another voice chimed in, soothing and sycophantic. It was Tiffany, her maid of honor and chief enabler. "Don't worry, babe. You look stunning. Everyone is talking about how much he loves you. Did you see him crying during the vows?" I heard Jasmine let out a scoff, a harsh, ugly sound. "He was crying because he is stressed, Tiffany. Let us be real. He is sweating like a pig out there. It is gross. I had to hold my breath when he kissed me because he smells like fear and cheap cologne." I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. On stage, she had looked at him like he was her sun and stars. "And look at this," Jasmine continued, her voice rising in irritation. "Look at this ring. Just look at it." I heard a hand smack against the marble counter. "It is beautiful, Jasmine," Tiffany said, though her voice wavered slightly. "It is classic. It is small, Tiffany," Jasmine snapped. "He promised me 5 carats. 5. He showed me pictures. He took me to the store and we looked at the emerald cut. And then he proposes with this? What is this? 2 carats? Maybe 1.8? It is embarrassing. I had to angle my hand specifically during the photos so it looked bigger. If I post a close-up on Instagram, people are going to laugh at me." I listened, feeling a cold knot tighten in my chest. She wasn't talking about a marriage. She was talking about a transaction. And she felt shortchanged. "Well," Tiffany said, trying to salvage the mood, "maybe he is saving the money for the house. That penthouse is going to be amazing, right?" Jasmine let out a long sigh, the sound of someone enduring a great burden. "That is the only reason I am going through with this," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Listen, Tiffany, you know I am not stupid, right? I know Hunter is having some cash flow issues." She paused, and I could hear the sound of makeup being rummaged through, probably touching up her lipstick. "But Daddy said this merger with Vance Global is a done deal," Jasmine said. "Once that goes through, Hunter is going to be worth $20 million easy. That is the exit strategy." "Exit strategy?" Tiffany asked, sounding confused. Jasmine laughed coldly. "Yeah, exit strategy. I give it 6 months. Maybe a year if I can stand his snoring. Once the merger closes and the cash hits the account, I am filing for divorce. I will take half. Community property state, remember? I get 10 million, I get the penthouse, and I get to be free of his sweaty hands. That is the plan. I just have to smile and wave for a few more hours." My heart was pounding so hard, I thought they might hear it through the stall door. This was cold-blooded. Even for Jasmine, this was a new level of calculation. She wasn't just a spoiled brat. She was a predator. She was using Hunter just as much as he was using my parents. It was a circle of parasites feeding off each other. "You are bad," Tiffany giggled nervously. "But hey, get your bag, girl." "Exactly," Jasmine said. "Now help me get this corset back in place. I think I ate too much of that cake. I need to look snatched for the first dance." I had heard enough. I stood up. I didn't try to be quiet this time. I reached out and unlocked the stall door with a loud metallic click that echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. The giggling stopped instantly. I pushed the door open and stepped out. Jasmine and Tiffany were standing by the sinks. Jasmine was barefoot, holding a tube of lipstick halfway to her mouth. Tiffany was on her knees, adjusting the hem of Jasmine's dress. They both froze, staring at me in the mirror. For a second, there was total silence. I saw the color drain from Jasmine's face, then rush back in a violent shade of red. She didn't look ashamed. She looked furious. She looked like a child who had been caught stealing cookies and decided to blame the jar for being open. Zara, Jasmine hissed, spinning around to face me. "How long have you been in there?" "Long enough," I said, my voice steady and cool. "Long enough to hear that you're planning to divorce your husband before the cake is even digested." Jasmine narrowed her eyes, stepping toward me. She was shorter than me without her heels, but her anger gave her height. "You were spying on me," she accused, jabbing a manicured finger in my direction. You creep! Who does that? Hiding in a toilet stall listening to private conversations? You are sick, Zara. You have always been obsessed with me. I almost laughed. The projection was incredible. I came in here for peace, Jasmine, I said. You are the one who turned it into a war room. Does Mom know? Does she know you are planning to take the money and run? Or does she think this is actually a fairy tale? Jasmine rolled her eyes, crossing her arms over her chest. Mom knows what she needs to know, she said dismissively. She wants me to be rich. She wants me to be happy. How I get there doesn't matter. Not that you would understand. She looked me up and down, her gaze raking over my emerald dress with disdain. Look at you, she sneered. 35 years old and hiding in a bathroom at your little sister-is wedding. It is pathetic, Zara. You are jealous. You are so jealous it is eating you alive. You cannot stand that I am the one getting the ring, the man, and the attention. You are mad because no one has ever wanted to marry you. Tiffany snickered from the corner, emboldened by Jasmine's attack. Jasmine smiled a cruel, twisted expression. You are going to die alone, Zara, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper meant to hurt. You are too dark, too difficult, and too old. Men like Hunter want trophies, not workhorses. So go ahead. Run and tell Mom what I said. She won't believe you. She never believes you. She will just say you are trying to ruin my big day because you are bitter. I stood there, letting her words wash over me. Years ago, they would have made me cry. They would have made me beg for her approval. But tonight, standing in that marble room with the knowledge of what was on Juliana's iPad, her words felt empty. They were the desperate lashes of a cornered animal. I took a step forward, invading her space for once. I looked her dead in the eye. You are right, Jasmine, I said quietly. I am not a trophy. I work for a living. And because I work for a living, I understand how money actually works. I tilted my head slightly, studying her confident, arrogant face. You are talking about taking half, I said. You are counting on community property laws. But here is a lesson from the real world, little sister. Marriage is a financial partnership. You share the assets, yes, but you also share the liabilities. Jasmine blinked, looking confused for a split second before masking it with a sneer. What are you talking about? She asked. I mean, I said, leaning in closer, that you better be very sure Hunter has assets to split. Because if he is in debt, if he owes millions to investors and creditors, when you divorce him, you don't get a check. You get a bill. You get half the debt, Jasmine. That is how the law works. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The doubt flickered behind her eyes, the first crack in her armor. You are lying, she stammered. He is rich. The merger, I interrupted, soft but lethal, is the only thing keeping him out of jail. And you better pray it goes through, because right now, that ring on your finger, the one you are complaining is too small, it is practically the only solvent asset he has. Jasmine stared at me. The fear was there now, real and raw, but her pride was stronger. She couldn't let me win. She couldn't let the black sheep be the one to tell her the truth. Shut up! She screamed, her voice cracking. Just shut up! You are lying! You just want to scare me! She grabbed the closest thing to her, which was a crystal tumbler of water sitting on the vanity intended for rinsing. Before I could react, she threw the contents at me. The cold water hit my chest, soaking the silk of my emerald bodice instantly. It shocked me, the temperature. making me gasp. Water dripped down my front, staining the expensive fabric dark. "There!" Jasmine shrieked, panting heavily. "Now you look like a mess. Now you look like exactly what you are. Get out! Get out of my wedding!" Tiffany rushed forward, grabbing Jasmine's arm. "Come on, Jazz, calm down. She is crazy. Let us just go. We have to do the first dance." Jasmine glared at me one last time, her chest heaving. "Don't you dare come back to the main table," she hissed. "Stay in the back where you belong. Or better yet, go home. No one will miss you." She spun around, grabbing her shoes and stomping out of the restroom, barefoot, leaving wet footprints on the marble floor. Tiffany scurried after her, casting one last terrified look at me. The heavy door swung shut, and silence returned to the room. I stood there, water dripping from my dress onto the floor. I looked in the mirror. My dress was ruined. My hair was damp near the edges. But I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile Julian had worn. The smile of the wolf. She thought she had won. She thought she had humiliated me. But she hadn't listened. I had warned her. I had given her the only piece of honest financial advice she would ever receive. "She is banking on half the assets," I whispered to my reflection, wiping a drop of water from my chin. I reached into my purse and pulled out a tissue, dabbing at the stain. It wouldn't come out, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going to hide. "I am going to make sure she gets exactly what she deserves," I said aloud. "She wants half? I will make sure she gets half of the ruin." I threw the tissue into the trash can. I smoothed my hair. I squared my shoulders. I walked back toward the door not as a victim, but as a witness for the prosecution. The first dance was about to start, and thanks to Jasmine, I now knew exactly where to aim the final blow. The bathroom door clicked shut behind me, sealing away the memory of Jasmine's screeching voice and the water dripping down my dress. I walked back toward the ballroom, the sound of my own heels echoing on the plush carpet. I felt cold, not just from the wet silk clinging to my skin, but from a deep, bone-chilling realization that my sister was not merely a brat, but a parasite. She was planning to divest Hunter of assets he did not even possess. It was a collision of two trains, both carrying dynamite, and my parents were standing on the tracks, waving flags. I slipped back into the darkened alcove behind the concrete pillar. Julian was still there, sitting exactly where I had left him. He looked like a statue carved from obsidian, calm and immovable amidst the chaos of the party. He didn't ask what happened. He simply pushed the glass of whiskey toward me, his eyes taking in the dark water stain on my bodice with a knowing look. "Drink," he said softly. "You look like you have seen a ghost." "I have seen the future," I replied, picking up the glass. "And it is ugly." Before I could explain, the lights in the ballroom dimmed once more. The music, which had been a lively jazz number, faded into silence. The master of ceremonies stepped back into the spotlight, his face flushed with excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please," the MC announced, his voice booming through the speakers. "We have a very special moment prepared. The parents of the bride, Patricia and Robert Washington, have a surprise gift for the happy couple." A hush fell over the room. The spotlight swung away from the stage and landed on the double doors at the far end of the room. My parents stood there, framed by the light, like actors in a melodrama. Jasmine's eyes were glued to the velvet box,
her earlier anxiety about the small ring replaced by naked greed. Hunter looked curious but wary, calculating the potential value of whatever was inside. My mother took the microphone, her hand trembling. She looked out at the crowd, her gaze sweeping over the faces of the wealthy guests she was so desperate to impress. She didn't look for me. She never looked for me. "My darling Jasmine," she began, her voice wobbling with emotion. "When you were born, I promised myself that I would give you the world. You are a princess, and a princess deserves a castle." She paused, letting the audience coo. "Your father and I wanted to give you something to start your new life properly," she continued. "We know that Hunter has big plans, and we wanted to make sure you had a home that matched the brilliance of your future." She nodded to my father. He slowly opened the velvet box. Inside, resting on a bed of white satin, was not a tea set. It was a single, large, golden key. And beside it was a thick stack of legal documents bound with a red ribbon. The room went silent. "We know how much you loved the view from the penthouse at the Millennium Tower," my mother said, beaming. "So we bought it for you. It is yours, paid in full." A collective gasp went through the room. The Millennium Tower. I did the math instantly in my head. A penthouse in that building started at $4 million. My parents did not have $4 million. Their savings were modest. Their retirement accounts were healthy, but not that healthy. My heart stopped beating. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me lightheaded. "How?" I whispered the word, choking me. How did they afford that? My mother answered my question before I could even finish asking it. "We had to make some sacrifices," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was meant to sound noble, but sounded to me like a confession. "We sold the family brownstone in Brooklyn last week. But Grandma died without a will. The house went to my father, her only son, and he had promised to keep it in the family. He had promised. And now, they had sold it. They had sold my childhood. They had sold the only physical evidence that I had ever been loved. And they had done it to buy a glass box in Manhattan for a daughter who despised them." I felt a scream building in my chest, a primal roar of grief and betrayal. They didn't tell me. They knew I would have bought it. I had the money. I would have paid double whatever market price they got just to save it. But they didn't ask. They didn't want me to have it. They wanted to liquidate my legacy to fund Jasmine is fantasy. "Oh, Mommy, Daddy!" Jasmine shrieked, throwing her arms around them. She didn't care about the brownstone. She hated that house. She called it musty and old. She wanted marble and steel. I watched through a blur of tears as Hunter stepped forward. I watched Hunter's lips form the words. I read them as clearly as if he had shouted them. "It is a clean deed." That was the first sentence. Then he smiled a smile that was not happy but predatory. A smile of a man who just found a life raft in the middle of the ocean. "I can leverage this for $2 million by Monday," he whispered. I watched Chad whisper back, "Are you sure? The wife?" Hunter laughed, a short, sharp exhale. "She won't know," he mouthed. "I will take the loan against the equity. It covers the margin call and gives me 6 months of runway. This saved my ass." He patted the pocket where he had shoved the deed. I sat back in my chair feeling like I had been punched in the gut. They didn't just sell my grandmother remains. They threw them into a fire. My parents had liquidated their entire life-is work, their legacy, and my sanctuary to buy a home that Hunter was going to mortgage within 48 hours.
He wasn't going to live in it. He was going to use it as collateral to pay off his gambling debts or his Ponzi scheme investors. And when he defaulted, which he inevitably would, the bank would take the penthouse. My parents would be homeless. Jasmine would be destitute. And the brownstone? My beautiful, historic brownstone with the window seat and the lavender sachets would be gone forever, turned into condos by some developer. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. I looked at my mother. She was wiping her eyes, looking so proud of her sacrifice. She had no idea she had just handed a loaded gun to the man who was going to shoot her. I looked at Julian. He was watching me. He had seen my reaction. He had seen the way I tracked Hunter's lips. "What did he say?" Julian asked quietly. "He said he is going to leverage it for $2 million by Monday," I said, my voice sounding strange and hollow to my own ears. "He is going to take out a loan against the deed to cover his margin call." Julian closed his eyes for a second, a look of disgust crossing his face. "The house meant something to you, didn't it?" he asked. "It was my grandmother's house," I whispered. "It was the only place I was happy." I looked back at the stage. Hunter was holding the key up for a photo op. Jasmine was posing, showing off her ring. My parents were beaming. Something snapped inside me. It wasn't a thread, it was a steel cable. The grief was gone. The sadness was gone. All that was left was a white-hot fury that burned through my veins like gasoline. They had taken everything from me. My dignity, my place in the family, and now my memories. They had sold my past to finance a fraud. I couldn't sit behind the pillar anymore. I couldn't sit in the dark and drink whiskey while they danced on the grave of the woman who raised me. I stood up. The wooden chair scraped loudly against the floor, a harsh screeching sound that cut through the polite applause. A few heads turned in my direction. Julian looked up at me. He didn't tell me to sit down this time. He didn't tell me to wait. He saw the look in my eyes. It was the look of a prosecutor who had just found the murder weapon. He stood up with me. He buttoned his jacket. He picked up the iPad from the table. "Are we doing this?" he asked. I looked at the stage where Hunter was tucking the deed into his jacket pocket like it was a winning lottery ticket. "I am going to burn it all down," I said. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the fire. I was the match. I was standing up, ready to unleash a scream that had been building in my chest for 20 years. My mouth was open, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I was going to shout about the brownstone. I was going to scream about the betrayal. I was going to tear the entire facade of this wedding down with my bare hands and the sheer force of my grief. But before the first sound could leave my throat, a hand clamped around my wrist. It was not a violent grip. It was precise. It was anchoring. It was the kind of touch that said, "Stop and think." "Sit down, Zara." Julian, his voice was low, but it cut through the red haze of my anger like a laser. He pulled me downward, not with force, but with a gravity that I could not resist. I collapsed back into the rickety wooden chair, my legs suddenly feeling like water. I turned on him, my eyes blazing. "Let go of me," I hissed. "Did you hear what they did? They sold my grandmother's house. They gave it to that con artist. I am not going to sit here and watch them destroy everything." "I know," Julian said calmly. He didn't look at the stage where Hunter was still clutching the deed to my childhood home like a trophy. He was looking at me. His expression was unreadable, utterly composed amidst my chaos. "I know they sold the house, and I know Hunter is going to leverage it on Monday morning at 9 o'clock. I froze.
How do you know that?
Because Julian said, reaching into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket, I read the prospectus. He pulled out a device. It was not a phone. It was a slim, professional-grade tablet, the kind used by high-level executives who need to move mountains of data with a swipe of a finger. He placed it on the small, wobbly table between us, pushing aside the empty whiskey glass. He tapped the screen. A file opened. It was a forensic audit report. I blinked, trying to focus through my tears. The formatting looked familiar. The font was familiar. The structure of the executive summary, the way the liabilities were highlighted in red and the assets in green, was identical to the style I used. In fact, it was the style I used. I leaned closer, my heart hammering against my ribs. I read the first paragraph. Subject: Project Icarus. Target entity: HM Ventures. Risk assessment: critical. Recommendation: immediate termination of merger talks. I gasped. The air left my lungs in a rush. I wrote this. I whispered, my voice trembling. I wrote this report 3 days ago. I looked up at Julian, my mind racing. I wrote this for a blind client, I said. The piece is starting to click together, but the picture's still too big to comprehend. My agency contacted me. They said a private equity firm needed a rush job on a potential acquisition target. They redacted the names. They called it Project Icarus. They sent me the raw data, the bank statements, the tax returns, the shell company ledgers, but all the personal identifiers were blacked out. Julian nodded slowly, a small, impressed smile playing on his lips. You did, he said, and you did a magnificent job. You found the $4 million hole in the balance sheet that 3 other audit firms missed. You traced the wire transfers to the offshore accounts in the Caymans. You identified the Ponzi structure disguised as a high-yield crypto fund. He tapped the screen again, and the redactions vanished. The name Project Icarus disappeared. In its place appeared the real name of the target entity, Hunter Miller Ventures. I stared at the screen. The numbers I had crunched in my home office, the discrepancies I had flagged while eating takeout at 2 a.m, thinking it was just another faceless corporate crook. It was him. It was Hunter. I was auditing my own brother-in-law, and I didn't even know it. You, I breathed, looking at Julian with wide eyes. You are the client. You are the private equity firm. Julian Vance at your service, he said, extending a hand slightly, as if we were in a boardroom and not hiding behind a pillar at a wedding. Vance Global, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. You are the Julian Vance, the shark of Wall Street, the man who buys companies for breakfast and sells them for lunch. Hunter kept bragging about a merger, I said, my voice rising. He said he was merging with a major conglomerate. He said that was his exit strategy. He was trying to merge with me, Julian corrected. Or rather, he was trying to get me to acquire his debt-laden house of cards so he could cash out and leave me holding the bag. He thought he was smart. He thought because he is a smooth talker with a firm handshake, he could fool me. Julian leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto mine. But he didn't know I hired the best ghost auditors in the business. He didn't know I hired the ghost auditor. He used my nickname, the name I was known by in the dark corners of the financial world, the Ghost. Because I never met clients, I never went to meetings. I just took the data, found the bodies, and vanished. You knew who I was, I said. You knew I was his sister-in-law. I suspected, Julian said. When I got the background check on Hunter Miller, I saw the connection. I saw he was marrying a Jasmine Washington, and I saw that Jasmine Washington had a sister named Zara, who happened to be the best forensic accountant on the Eastern Seaboard. It seemed too coincidental. So I hired you. I wanted to see if you would protect him, or if you would do your job. He gestured to the report on the screen. You did your job, Zara. You were ruthless. You tore his financials apart without mercy. That is when I knew I had to come to this wedding. I had to meet the woman who could dismantle a con artist with a spreadsheet, but still gets put in the corner by her own mother. I felt a flush of shame mixed with the pride. He had seen my work. He respected my mind. But he had also seen me humiliated. So what now? I asked, looking at the tablet where the evidence of Hunter Is crimes glowed in high definition. Why are you showing me this now? Why didn't you just cancel the deal and walk away? Because canceling the deal is business, Julian said, his voice hardening. It saves my money, but it does not save your parents. He swiped to the next page of the report. It was a new addendum, one I hadn't written. It was dated today. Look at this, he said, pointing to a transaction log. I squinted. It was a pending wire transfer, a loan application. Hunter had already pre-approved a hard money loan using the deed to the penthouse as collateral. The application was time-stamped for Monday morning. The lender was a notorious loan shark disguised as a payday lender. Interest rate, 25%. He is not waiting, Julian explained. He set this up days ago. He knew your parents were going to give him the house. He groomed them for it. He convinced them to sell the brownstone, probably told them it was a smart investment. And the second he gets that deed recorded on Monday morning, he is pulling out $2 million in cash. And then? I asked, feeling sick. And then he disappears, Julian said flatly. He takes the cash. He leaves Jasmine with the debt. He leaves your parents homeless because they co-signed the guarantee. See, right there? He pointed to a signature line at the bottom of the digital document. Robert Washington, Patricia Washington. They signed it, I whispered. They thought they were signing property transfer papers, but they were signing a loan guarantee. They are not just victims, Zara Julian said. They are accomplices. Unwitting, maybe. Stupid, definitely. But they signed their lives away to buy a dream that does not exist. I looked up from the screen. Across the room, my parents were hugging Hunter. My father was patting him on the back, looking so relieved, so happy to have a wealthy son-in-law who would take care of everything. My mother was laughing, throwing her head back, completely unaware that she was standing on the edge of a cliff. They did this to themselves, I said, my voice cracking. They sold my grandmother's house. They treated me like trash. Why should I save them? I looked at Julian, waiting for him to tell me to be the bigger person, waiting for him to give me the moral high ground speech about family being family. But he didn't. You shouldn't save them, Julian said, cold as ice. You owe them nothing. If you want, we can walk out of here right now. We can get in my car, go to dinner, and let Monday morning happen. Hunter will get the money, your parents will lose everything, Jasmine will be bankrupt, and you? You will be rich, because I am going to offer you a job that pays triple your current rate. He paused, watching me closely. You can walk away, Zara. You can let them burn. It would be justice. I looked at the stage. I looked at the velvet box that had held the key to my grandmother's house. I thought about the window seat. I thought about the lavender sachets. If I walk away, Hunter wins, I said slowly.
He gets the 2 million. He gets to destroy my grandmother's legacy. Julian nodded. Exactly. I don't care about saving my parents, I said, my voice strengthening, hardening into steel. And I certainly don't care about saving Jasmine. But I will be damned if I let that man walk away with a single brick of my grandmother's house. I looked back at the tablet. The glowing numbers were not just data anymore. They were ammunition. I want to stop him, I said. I want to destroy him. I want to do it publicly. I want everyone in this room, everyone who laughed at me, everyone who looked down on me, to know exactly what he is. Julian smiled. It was the smile of a partner, the smile of a co-conspirator. Then do it, he said. He pushed the tablet toward me. This is your report, Zara. You wrote it. You own it. I am just the investor. You are the executioner. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver drive. This connects to the main projection system, he said. The AV guy is on my payroll. I bought him out 10 minutes ago. All you have to do is plug this in and authorize the broadcast. He held the drive out to me. Do you want to be the victim sitting behind the pillar? He asked softly. Or do you want to be the ghost who haunts them? I looked at the drive. I looked at my hands. The hands that had scrubbed floors, the hands that had typed audit reports until my fingers bled, the hands that had been slapped away by my mother when I tried to touch the hem of Jasmine's dress. I took the drive. I am not a ghost, I said, standing up and smoothing the wet silk of my ruined dress. I am the reckoning. Julian stood up with me. He buttoned his jacket, adjusting his cuffs. After you, he said, gesturing toward the stage. I stepped out from behind the pillar. I stepped out of the shadows. I walked into the light, not as the sister who was told to sit down, but as the auditor who was about to close the account. I stepped out from the shadow of the pillar, but before I could make it to the AV booth to plug in the drive, the obstacle came to me. Hunter was making his rounds. He was weaving through the tables with the loose, disjointed gait of a man who had consumed too much premium champagne on an empty stomach. He was high on adrenaline and arrogance, clutching a fresh glass of bubbly in one hand and shaking hands with guests with the other. He looked like he owned the world. His face was flushed a deep, mottled red, and his tie was slightly crooked. He was laughing too loudly at jokes that were not funny, clapping men on the back with too much force. He was performing the role of the benevolent patriarch, the successful tycoon who had just secured his family's future. I watched him approach our dark corner. He was not coming to thank me. He was coming to gloat. He was coming to make sure the poor relation in the shadows knew exactly how high above her he had risen. He stopped in front of our wobbly table, swaying slightly. The smell of alcohol wafting off him was pungent, masking the expensive cologne he had bathed in. He looked down at me, his eyes glassy and unfocused before they sharpened with a cruel amusement. Well, 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 Hunter slurred, a smirk plastering itself onto his sweaty face. If it isn't the ghost of the party. Still sitting in the dark, Zara? You know, most people would have gone home by now, out of shame, but not you. You stick around like a bad smell. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, clutching the silver drive in my hand, my heart beating a steady rhythm of anticipation. Hunter, his gaze drifted from my face to the table. He was looking for something else to mock, some other sign of my inferiority. Maybe he expected to see a stolen bread roll or a glass of water. Instead, his eyes landed on the bottle.
Julian had placed the flask away, but the bottle of Macallan 1926 Fine and Rare, which he had seemingly conjured from the ether earlier, sat proudly on the wood. To the uninitiated, it looked like just another bottle of whiskey. But Hunter considered himself a connoisseur. He subscribed to all the luxury magazines. He knew the labels even if he could never afford the taste. He froze. His mouth dropped open slightly. He blinked, rubbing his eyes as if he were seeing a hallucination. Is that Macallan 26? He whispered, the slur vanishing from his voice for a second, replaced by pure shock. He leaned in closer, his nose almost touching the glass. He read the label. He looked at the serial number. He knew what it was. It was a bottle that retailed for more than most people earned in a decade. It was a bottle that belonged in a vault, not on a rickety table behind a pillar at a wedding. Where did you get this? Hunter demanded, his head snapping up to look at me. His shock was instantly replaced by accusation. He pointed a shaking finger at my chest. You stole this, didn't you? You sneaked into the manager's office or the wine cellar and you stole it. I stared at him, incredulous. The idea was so absurd it was almost funny. Hunter, that bottle is worth more than your life, I said calmly. You think I just slipped it into my purse? Don't lie to me, he shouted, drawing the attention of the nearby tables. Guests turned around, forks suspended halfway to their mouths. I know you, Zara Hunter spat. You are broke. You are a freelancer. You scrape by. There is no way in hell you could afford this. You stole it to try and impress people. You wanted to look like you belonged here, but you are just a thief. He reached out greedily, eyeing the bottle. I am confiscating this, he announced, puffing out his chest. As the host of this event, I cannot allow stolen property to be consumed. I am going to take this to the main table. It will go nicely with my cigar. He moved to grab the neck of the bottle, but then he noticed the hand resting next to it. For the first time, Hunter seemed to actually see Julian. He had been so focused on me and the whiskey that he had treated Julian like part of the furniture. Now he looked at the man sitting in the shadows. Julian hadn't moved. He was still seated, casually, one arm draped over the back of his chair, the other resting near the bottle. He was looking at Hunter with an expression of mild boredom, like a lion watching a particularly noisy fly. Hunter squinted, his drunken eyes narrowing. He took in Julian's dark skin. He took in the silence. And in Hunter's limited, prejudiced worldview, he came to the only conclusion his bigotry would allow. And who is this? Hunter sneered, gesturing vaguely at Julian. He looked back at me, a disgusting grin spreading across his face. Oh, I get it. Is this your date, Zara? Did you hire him? My blood ran cold. The insult was so gross, so reductive that I felt sick. Hunter laughed, looking around for validation from the nearby guests. That is it, isn't it? You couldn't get a real man to come with you, so you went to some corner and hired a gigolo. How much do you pay him by the hour? Or does he accept food stamps? The racism was casual, tossed out with the ease of someone who had never been punched in the face for it. He called Julian a gigolo, not because Julian looked like one, but because Hunter couldn't conceive of a world where a black man in a suit was anything other than hired help or a hired lover. Hey, buddy, Hunter barked at Julian, snapping his fingers in Julian's face. You can leave now. The open bar is closed for staff and contractors. Get out of my wedding before I call security. Julian didn't blink. He didn't speak. He just took a slow sip from his glass, his eyes never leaving Hunter's face. The silence stretched out taut as a wire. Then I heard the frantic clicking of heels. Oh my God, Zara, what are you doing? My mother, Patricia, came rushing out of the crowd. She had heard the shouting. She saw Hunter red-faced and pointing. She saw the guests staring. And, true to form, she didn't ask what happened. She just assumed I was the problem. Mom Hunter turned to her, playing the victim instantly. Zara stole a $70,000 bottle of whiskey from the hotel, and she brought this guy in here. He is insulting guests. He is drinking our alcohol. My mother gasped, clapping a hand to her chest. She looked at the whiskey bottle, then at Julian, then at me with pure venom. "Zara Washington!" she shrieked, her voice pitching up so everyone could hear her indignation. "How dare you? How dare you bring shame on this family on your sister's wedding day?" She marched up to me, grabbing my arm and digging her nails into my flesh. "I told you to stay out of sight," she hissed. "I told you not to embarrass us. And you go and steal liquor? And you bring a stranger in here to make a scene?" "Mom, I didn't steal anything," I said, trying to pull my arm away. "And this is not a stranger." "Shut up!" she screamed. "I do not want to hear your lies. You are jealous. You have always been jealous of Jasmine. You want to ruin everything because you are miserable." She turned to Hunter, her face softening into an apologetic mask. "Oh, Hunter, I am so sorry. She is obviously having a breakdown. Please forgive her. We will handle this." She turned back to Julian, pointing a manicured finger at the exit. "You," she commanded, "get out right now. I do not know who you are or what gutter my daughter picked you out of, but you are not welcome here. This is a respectable event for respectable people. We do not want your kind here causing trouble." Your kind. The words hung in the air, heavy and ugly. Julian finally moved. He set his glass down on the table with a deliberate clink. He didn't look at my mother. He looked at Hunter. "I believe," he said, his voice low and smooth like velvet wrapped around a blade, "that you were about to touch my property." Hunter blinked, confused by the authority in the voice. He puffed his chest out, trying to reassert dominance. "Your property?" Hunter scoffed. "You do not own anything here, pal. This is my wedding. That is my whiskey now. And you are trespassing." Hunter reached out his hand, aiming to backhand the bottle off the table. He wanted to smash it. He wanted to destroy the thing he couldn't have just to prove he had the power to do it. "I am going to teach you a lesson," Hunter growled, lunging forward. His hand was inches from the bottle. Then it happened. It was so fast I almost missed it. Julian's hand shot up from the armrest. He didn't block the blow. He caught it. He clamped his hand around Hunter's wrist mid-air. Hunter stopped dead, his momentum arrested instantly. He looked down stupidly at his arm. Julian's grip was like a vice. His fingers, long and elegant, were wrapped completely around Hunter's wrist, compressing the tendons. "Let go of me!" Hunter shouted, trying to yank his hand back. He couldn't move. He pulled harder, grunting with effort. Julian didn't budge an inch. He sat there, perfectly relaxed, holding a struggling grown man with one hand as if he were holding a child. "You have a very loose grip on reality," Julian said conversationally. "Let me help you tighten it." Julian stood up. He didn't just stand up. He unfurled. When he was sitting, he looked tall. When he stood, he was a mountain. He towered over Hunter by at least 5 inches. His shoulders blocked out the light from the chandelier. The bespoke suit stretched across his chest, emphasizing a physique that was built for power, not just for show. Hunter's eyes went wide. He looked up, up, up into Julian's face. Julian twisted his wrist. It wasn't a violent jerk. It was a slow, calculated rotation. Everyone heard it. Snap. It was a dry, crisp sound, like a dead branch breaking in a winter forest. Hunter screamed. It was a high-pitched sound, a sound of pure shock and agony. His knees buckled. He dropped to the floor, writhing. But Julian didn't let go. He held Hunter up by the broken wrist, forcing him to dance on his tiptoes to alleviate the pressure. My mother screamed, stepping back and covering her mouth. "You broke his arm! You broke my son-in-law his arm! Police! Someone call the police!" Julian looked down at Hunter, who was now whimpering, snot running down his face. The arrogance completely gone, replaced by the primal fear of a prey animal caught in a trap. "I did not break his arm," Julian said calmly. "I merely adjusted his attitude." He released the wrist. Hunter collapsed to the floor, cradling his hand, curling into a ball at Julian's feet. Julian adjusted his cuffs, smoothing out a non-existent wrinkle in his jacket. He looked at my mother, who was trembling with rage and fear. "And madam," he said, his voice projecting to the back of the room effortlessly, "before you call the authorities, you might want to ask your son-in-law why he was trying to steal a $25,000 bottle of whiskey from the man who owns the bank that holds his mortgage." My mother froze. The guests froze. Julian turned to me. The menace that had radiated off him a second ago vanished, replaced by that wolfish partnership smile. He offered me his arm. "Shall we, Zara? I believe you have a presentation to give." I looked at Hunter sobbing on the floor. I looked at my mother staring at us with her mouth open. I looked at the whiskey bottle sitting untouched and pristine on the table. I took Julian's arm. "Let us go," I said, stepping over Hunter's legs. "I think the audience is ready." The chaos that erupted after the sickening snap of Hunter's wrist was instantaneous and deafening. My mother was screaming for the police, her voice cracking with hysteria as she pointed a trembling finger at Julian. Hunter was scrambling backward on the floor, cradling his injured arm against his chest, his face a mask of snot and tears and rage. The guests who had been whispering about us all night were now standing on their chairs, craning their necks to get a better view of the violence. "Security!" Hunter bellowed, his voice high and reedy with pain. "Get security in here! This maniac assaulted me! He is trying to kill me!" The double doors burst open, and 3 uniformed security guards charged into the ballroom. They were large men with earpieces and stern faces, the kind hired to toss out drunk uncles and handle wedding crashers. They saw Hunter on the floor, they saw my mother shrieking, and they saw Julian standing tall and impassive in the center of the storm. "There he is!" my mother shouted, rushing toward the lead guard. "That man! The one in the black suit! He broke my son-in-law's arm! Arrest him immediately! Throw him in jail!" The guards moved in formation, encircling Julian and me. The lead guard reached for his belt, unclipping a pair of handcuffs. "Sir, turn around and place your hands behind your back," the guard commanded, his voice booming over the murmurs of the crowd. I felt a surge of panic. If they arrested Julian, if they dragged him out of here in cuffs, Hunter would win. The narrative would shift. Hunter would be the victim, the martyr, attacked by a violent intruder. The truth about the fraud would be buried under the scandal of the assault. I stepped forward, instinctively trying to shield Julian. "No, you do not understand," I started to say, my voice shaking. But Julian didn't move. He didn't turn around. He didn't put his hands behind his back. He didn't even look at the guards. He was looking past them, toward the entrance of the ballroom, where a short, balding man in an impeccably tailored tuxedo was sprinting toward us. The man was running so fast he nearly slipped on the polished marble floor. His face was pale, his eyes wide with terrified recognition. It was Mr. Henderson, the general manager of the Pierre. I recognized him because I had seen him earlier greeting the VIP guests at the door, the ones who arrived in limousines, not the ones who entered through the service entrance like me. "Stop!" Mr. Henderson screamed, his voice cracking. "Stop right now! Do not touch him!" The lead guard froze, his hand inches from Julian's shoulder. He looked back at his boss, confused. "Mr. Henderson?" the guard asked. "Sir, this man just assaulted the groom. We have to—" "You will do absolutely nothing!" Mr. Henderson shrieked, breathless as he skid to a halt in front of us. He pushed the guard away violently, almost knocking the large man over. "Step back! All of you! Step back immediately!" The guards retreated, confused by the sudden change in command. The room fell into a stunned silence. Even my mother stopped screaming, her mouth hanging open as she watched the general manager of one of New York, his most exclusive hotels, practically bow before the man she had just called a gutter rat. Mr. Henderson smoothed his tuxedo jacket, his hands shaking visibly. He looked up at Julian with a mixture of awe and absolute terror. "Mr. Vance," he gasped, beads of sweat forming on his upper lip. "I am so terribly sorry. I had no idea you were in the building. If I had known, I would have prepared the presidential suite. I would have personally attended to your table. This is a catastrophic failure of hospitality. Please accept my deepest apologies." Julian looked down at the manager, his expression mild. "It is all right, Henderson," Julian said, his voice calm and authoritative, echoing in the silent room. "I came in through the service entrance. I wanted a low-profile evening, although, I must admit, the seating arrangements left something to be desired." "Mr." Henderson turned pale, looking at the rickety table behind the pillar. "Oh my God," he whispered, horrified. "You were sitting there? Behind the pillar?" Julian nodded, dusting a speck of lint from his lapel. "It gave me a unique perspective, Henderson. It allowed me to see exactly how this establishment treats its guests. Or at least, the guests who do not fit the preferred aesthetic." Mr. Henderson looked like he was about to faint. "I will fire the event coordinator immediately, sir. This is unacceptable." Hunter, who had managed to stand up clutching his wrist, stared at the scene with wide, bewildered eyes. The pain in his arm seemed to be forgotten, replaced by a dawning horror. "Vance?" Hunter whispered the name, coming out as a choked rasp. He looked at Julian. He looked at Mr. Henderson bowing and scraping, and then the gears in his alcohol-addled brain finally clicked into place. "Wait," Hunter said, stepping forward, his voice trembling. "Did you say Vance? As in Julian Vance?" Julian finally turned his attention back to the groom. He looked at Hunter with the same detached curiosity one might view a bacteria under a microscope. "Correct," Julian said simply. Hunter turned white. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. But that is impossible," Hunter stammered. "I have been talking to your team for weeks. We are merging. You are buying my company. Why would you be here? Why would you be sitting in the dark with her?" He gestured weakly at me. Julian let out a short, dry laugh. "I am not buying your company, Hunter," Julian said. "In fact, 10 minutes ago, While you were busy making false promises to your wife on stage, I sent an email to your legal team. The merger is dead." "Dead?" Hunter squeaked. "Rejected," Julian clarified, "due to gross financial negligence, fraudulent accounting practices, and a complete lack of moral character. I do not do business with liars, Hunter, and I certainly do not do business with men who steal from their in-laws to pay their gambling debts." A gasp rippled through the room. My mother put a hand to her throat. Jasmine, who had rushed over to see if Hunter was okay, froze in her tracks. You own this hotel?" Hunter asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I own the holding company that owns the real estate trust that owns this hotel," Julian corrected. "So when you tried to kick me out of my own property for stopping you from stealing my whiskey, you made a severe tactical error." Julian took a step toward Hunter, and the groom flinched, backing away until he bumped into the table. "You stood on that stage and bragged about an empire," Julian said, his voice rising so everyone could hear. "But you are standing on quicksand. You have no money, you have no merger, and as of right now, you have no venue. Because I am canceling this event." "Canceling?" my mother shrieked, finding her voice again. "You cannot do that! We paid the deposit! This is my daughter's wedding!" Julian turned to my mother. "You paid the deposit with a credit card that has already been declined, madam," he said coldly. "Henderson, run the card again." Mr. Henderson pulled out a tablet and tapped a few keys. He looked up, his face grim. "Declined, sir. Insufficient funds." My mother looked at Hunter, betrayal dawning in her eyes. "Hunter, you said you transferred the money." Hunter didn't answer. He was looking at the floor, wishing it would open up and swallow him whole. Julian turned away from them, dismissing them as if they were no longer relevant. He turned to me. For the first time all evening, he smiled, a genuine, warm smile. He reached out his hand, palm up, inviting me to step forward. "But there is one thing you are wrong about, Hunter," Julian said, looking over his shoulder at the groom. "You asked why I was sitting with Zara. You called her my hire. You insulted her intelligence and her worth." Julian took my hand. His grip was firm, proud. "I was sitting with Zara because she is the only person in this room worthy of respect," he announced. "And she is not my date. She is my colleague." He pulled me gently until I was standing right next to him, shoulder to shoulder, in the center of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian boomed his voice, commanding the attention of every single soul in that ballroom. "I would like to introduce you to the person who actually runs the show. This is Zara Washington. She is the lead forensic auditor who uncovered the fraud that your groom has been perpetrating." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And as of this evening," Julian continued, looking directly at my mother, "she is the newly appointed Director of Global Risk Management for Vance Global. She is the woman who protects my billions. So when you made her sit behind a pillar, you were not hiding a poor relation. You were insulting the most powerful woman in this room." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother stared at me. Her eyes were wide, searching my face as if looking for the daughter she thought she knew, the one she had dismissed as a failure. She looked at my emerald dress, the one she had called cheap, and suddenly she saw it differently. She saw the way I stood. She saw the way Julian Vance, the billionaire, looked at me with deference. "Director?" my mother whispered. "Zara?" Jasmine let out a sob, a sound of pure, selfish despair. But what about my house? Jasmine wailed. What about the penthouse? Hunter said the merger would pay for everything. Julian ignored her. He looked at me, his eyes shining with that wolfish delight. The floor is yours, Director, he said softly. I think it is time you showed them the receipts. He gestured to the AV booth where the technician following Mr. Henderson's frantic signal had plugged in the silver drive I had given him earlier. Suddenly, the giant screen behind the stage, the one that had been displaying a slideshow of Jasmine and Hunter's engagement photos, flickered. The romantic images vanished. In their place, a stark, high-definition spreadsheet appeared. It was titled Hunter Miller Ventures, Solvency Analysis. The spotlight, which had been dancing around the room, swung sharply. It cut through the darkness and landed squarely on us. It illuminated Julian in his power suit and me in my water-stained silk dress. But I didn't feel like a mess anymore. Bathed in that white light, standing next to the man who had given me the sword, I felt like an avenging angel. I looked at Hunter cowering on the floor. I looked at Jasmine crying over a lost fortune she never earned. I looked at my parents, realizing their retirement was gone. I stepped forward into the light. I didn't need a microphone. My voice rang out, clear and strong, fueled by 35 years of silence. Let us look at the numbers, I said, because unlike people, numbers never lie. I walked up the stairs to the stage. The last time I had walked toward this platform was 2 hours ago, to place a napkin under a wobbling table leg at Jasmine's request. Now, I walked with the rhythm of a predator entering a clearing. The sound of my heels on the wood was the only sound in the room. 300 people held their breath. My mother was frozen with her mouth open. Hunter was still on the floor, clutching his broken wrist, his face a mask of terror. I reached the podium. I took the microphone from the stand. It felt heavy, cold, and powerful. I nodded to the technician in the booth. Slide 1, please. The massive LED screen behind me flickered. The soft focus engagement photo of Hunter and Jasmine running on a beach dissolved into pixels. In its place, a stark, high-contrast spreadsheet appeared. It was ugly. It was complex. And it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I turned to the audience. I did not raise my voice. I spoke with the calm, clinical detachment of a surgeon explaining a fatal diagnosis. Hunter Miller claims to be a venture capitalist managing a portfolio of $20 million. He told my sister he was investing in tech startups. He told my father he was buying commercial real estate. I pointed to the screen where a jagged red line plummeted across a graph. This is the actual cash flow of Hunter Miller Ventures for the last 12 months. I stepped to the side so everyone could see the data clearly. On the left column, you will see the incoming funds. These are the deposits from investors. These are the checks my father wrote. These are the life savings of his college friends, totaling $4 million. A murmur went through the crowd. People were recognizing their own contributions. Now look at the right column. I tapped the screen virtually with my laser focus. There are no tech investments. There are no real estate purchases. Instead, we have 350 transactions to an offshore entity called Black Chip Holdings. I paused, letting the name sink in. For those of you who do not know, Black Chip Holdings is a shell corporation used to funnel money into unlicensed crypto casinos based in Malta. I zoomed in on a specific cluster of transactions dated 3 weeks ago. On the same day Hunter told my parents he was closing a deal with Google, he wired $50,000 to a site called highstakespoker.com. He lost it in 45 minutes. I looked at Hunter. You are not an investor, Hunter. You are a gambling addict with a Ponzi scheme to cover your losses. You did not lose their money on bad markets. You lost it on virtual blackjack. The room erupted. People stood up, shouting. I heard a man in the front row, one of Hunter's groomsmen, yell about his 50 grand. I held up a hand. I am not finished. Slide 2, please. The screen changed. The spreadsheet vanished, replaced by a blown-up, high-resolution photograph of a ring. It was the ring on Jasmina's finger, the one she had complained was too small, the one she thought was worth $50,000. Beside the photo was a screenshot of an invoice. Jasmine, I said, looking down at my sister. She was standing at the foot of the stage, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. You were upset that your diamond was only 2 carats. You told me in the bathroom that you planned to divorce Hunter and take half his assets. You wanted to know what your ring was worth. I pointed to the invoice on the screen. This is the purchase order from a website called Faux Sparkle. Item description: 2-carat moissanite solitaire, gold-plated band. I read the price tag aloud, my voice ringing out clearly. Total cost, including shipping and handling, $199.99. Jasmine let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. She looked down at her hand as if the ring was burning her skin. She tried to pull it off, clawing at her finger. He did not spend $50,000, Jasmine. He spent less than the cost of the champagne on your table. It is glass. It is fake. Just like his career. Just like his love for you. Jasmine ripped the ring off and threw it at Hunter. It bounced off his chest and rolled under a table. You lied to me, she screamed. You promised me a rock. I watched her meltdown with zero sympathy. She wasn't crying because she was heartbroken. She was crying because she was broke. But we are not done, I said, cutting through her hysterics. Slide 3. This is the important one. This is for you, Mom and Dad. The screen shifted again. This time, it displayed a legal document. It was a deed of trust. My parents stepped forward. My father looked confused, his face gray. My mother looked terrified, clinging to his arm. Robert and Patricia Washington, I said, addressing them by name, not by title. You sold Grandma Dorothea's brownstone. You handed Hunter the keys to a $4 million penthouse, thinking you were securing Jasmina's future. I pointed to the date stamp on the document on the screen. You thought you gave him that gift tonight. But look at the timestamp. The date was yesterday. The time was 9 a.m. Hunter forged your signatures on a transfer of ownership 24 hours ago. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. But he didn't just transfer the title, I continued, my voice dropping an octave, deadly serious. He used that stolen title to secure a hard money loan from a predatory lender in New Jersey. I zoomed in on the bottom of the document. Loan amount, $2 million. Interest rate, 25%. Immediate disbursement. I looked at my father. He has already spent it, Dad. He took the loan against the penthouse before you even handed him the keys. The money was wired to his account this morning, and half of it is already gone to pay off the loan sharks who are threatening to break his legs. I turned to the audience. The penthouse does not belong to Jasmine. It belongs to the bank. And because my parents signed as guarantors on the original purchase agreement, documents they didn't read because they trusted their son-in-law, they are now liable for the entire debt. I looked at my mother. You are not just homeless, Mom. You are bankrupt. You owe the bank $4 million for a house you do not own anymore. My mother's eyes rolled back in her head. Her hand went to her chest, clutching the fake pearls. She didn't make a sound. She simply crumpled. Mom! Jasmine screamed. My father tried to catch her, but he was too weak from the shock. Patricia Washington hit the floor with a heavy thud. The room descended into chaos. People were rushing forward. Someone was loosening her collar. Someone was pouring water. Hunter saw his chance. In the confusion, he tried to scramble to his feet, cradling his broken wrist. He looked toward the exit, his eyes wild. I didn't move from the podium. I didn't need to. Julian Vance stepped into Hunter's path. He didn't touch him. He just stood there, a wall of muscle and justice. Going somewhere? Julian asked pleasantly. The police are on their way, and I believe the FBI might want to have a word about the wire fraud. Hunter collapsed back onto the floor, sobbing. I looked out at the sea of faces, the wealthy guests, the judgy aunts, the friends who had laughed when I was told to sit behind a pillar. They were all silent now, staring at the screen, staring at the ruin of the Washington family. I gripped the microphone one last time. You all came here for a celebration, I said, my voice echoing in the rafters. You brought gifts. You wore your best clothes. You thought you were witnessing a union of two successful dynasties. I gestured to the unconscious form of my mother and the sobbing heap that was my sister. But let us be clear about what this event really is. I looked directly into the camera lens of the videographer, who was still recording, too shocked to stop. This was not a wedding, I said. This was a fundraising gala for a criminal enterprise. And every single one of you, I swept my arm across the room, encompassing the entire guest list. You are not guests. You are victims. And the show is over. I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening feedback screech that made everyone cover their ears. I turned my back on the audience. I turned my back on the screen. I walked down the stairs toward Julian. I didn't look at my mother on the floor. I didn't look at Jasmine. I walked straight to Julian, who was waiting for me with that same proud, intense look in his eyes. He offered me his arm again. Ready to go, director? He asked. I took his arm. I felt the solid warmth of him, the reality of him. Drive, I said. Get me out of here. We walked toward the exit, the crowd parting for us like the Red Sea. No one dared to stop us. No one dared to speak. They just watched the woman from behind the pillar walk out with the king of the city, leaving the ashes of the empire burning behind her. The silence that followed my speech was shattered by the screech of tires outside the main entrance, followed by the heavy thud of boots hitting the marble floor. The double doors, which had been the gateway for my parents' proud entrance just minutes ago, swung open with violent force. This was not hotel security. This was federal law enforcement. Agents in windbreakers emblazoned with the letters FBI swarmed into the ballroom. They moved with a terrifying efficiency, ignoring the screaming guests and the overturned chairs. They had a single target: Hunter Miller. Hunter tried to run. In his delusion, he actually thought he could escape. He scrambled to his feet, clutching his broken wrist, and made a dash toward the kitchen entrance, the very place where I had been forced to sit. But he didn't make it 5 steps. 2 agents tackled him. The sound of his tuxedo tearing was audible even over the commotion. They pinned him to the floor. his face pressed against the spilled champagne and cake crumbs. "Get off me!" Hunter screamed, his voice high and hysterical. "Do you know who I am? I am a CEO! This is a mistake. My lawyer will sue you for everything you have." "You have the right to remain silent," an agent shouted over him, pulling Hunter's good arm behind his back. I watched as the handcuffs clicked shut. The metal snapping around his wrists was the final period at the end of his fraudulent sentence. They hauled him up. He looked pathetic. His hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat and icing. His expensive fake shoes dragged on the floor. Jasmine let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. "Hunter!" she screamed, running toward him. She wasn't running to him out of love. I could see the panic in her eyes. She was running to him because he was her meal ticket, and she couldn't believe the meal was over. She grabbed onto his sleeve just as the agents were dragging him away. "Hunter, tell them!" Jasmine shrieked, shaking him. "Tell them about the merger! Tell them about the money! We need the money for the house!" Hunter looked at her, and for the first time the mask dropped completely. He didn't look at her with love. He looked at her with pure hatred. "There is no money, you stupid cow," he spat. The agents shoved Jasmine aside. She stumbled, her heels catching on her dress, and she fell to her knees. She tried to scramble up to follow them, but a female officer stepped in her path, blocking her way with a firm hand on her chest. "Jasmine Washington," the officer said, her voice cold and professional. "Do not leave the premises." Jasmine blinked, looking up at the officer with mascara running down her cheeks. "What?" Jasmine stammered. "I didn't do anything. He lied to me too. I am a victim." The officer shook her head, pulling a folded document from her vest. "According to our records, you are the co-signatory on the accounts used to launder the initial funds," the officer said. "And your name is listed as the secretary of the Shell Corporation Black Chip Holdings." Jasmine's jaw dropped. "I just signed what he told me to sign," she gasped. "He said it was for tax benefits." "Ignorance of the law is not a defense," the officer said. "You are liable for the outstanding debt, Mrs. Miller. You are not going anywhere until we process your statement." Liable. The word hung over Jasmine like a guillotine. She slumped against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor, burying her face in her hands. She wasn't going to the penthouse. She was going to an interrogation room. I stood there, watching the destruction of the fantasy my sister had built. It was total. It was absolute. Then I felt a hand on my arm. It was a weak, trembling grip. I turned. My father, Robert Washington, was standing there. He looked 10 years older than he had this morning. His skin was gray and his eyes were bloodshot. He was swaying slightly as if the ground beneath him had turned to liquid. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Sarah, please." He looked at the chaotic scene, at the police taking statements, at Hunter being shoved into a cruiser outside. Then he looked back at me with a desperate, pleading hope. "You have to fix this," he said, squeezing my arm. "You are smart, Zara. You know these things. You know the law." "Dad," I started to say, pulling my arm away. "The house," he interrupted, tears spilling onto his cheeks. "You have to get the house back. My mother is house, the brownstone. You said the bank has it. You have to call them. You have to tell them it was a mistake. Tell them Hunter tricked us." He grabbed my hand again, gripping it with a painful intensity. "We have nowhere to go, Zara. We sold everything. We put every cent into this. If we lose that house, we are on the street. You cannot let that happen to your parents. You are the responsible one. You always fix things. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had ignored me for 30 years. The man who had sat by while my mother criticized my hair and my career. The man who had sold the only safe haven I had ever known, without even a phone call to ask if I wanted to say goodbye. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for a bailout. He was asking me to be the invisible infrastructure again, the strong foundation he could build his mistakes on. I pulled my hand away. I did it slowly, deliberately, breaking the contact finger by finger. I cannot fix this, Dad, I said, my voice steady and devoid of the guilt he was trying to plant there. Yes, you can, he cried. You work for him. He pointed a shaking finger at Julian, who was standing a few feet away, watching us with a protective intensity. He is a billionaire. Ask him to buy it back. Ask him to save us. We are family, Zara. I stepped back, creating a physical distance between us. Family? I asked, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. Was I family when you made me sit behind a pillar? Was I family when you sold Grandma Dorothea's house to buy a wedding gift for Jasmine? Was I family when you watched Mom call me a failure? My father stammered, his mouth opening and closing. We didn't mean it, he whispered. We wanted Jasmine to be happy. Exactly, I said, cold, hard truth pouring out of me. You wanted Jasmine to be happy. You gambled everything on the golden child. You put all your chips on her. And you lost. I gestured to the empty ballroom, to the ruins of the party. The house is gone, Dad. It belongs to the bank now. It will be sold at auction to pay off Hunter's creditors. It is over. But where will we live? He sobbed. We have nothing. I looked him dead in the eye. You have your pride, I said. You sold my home to buy prestige. You sold my memories to buy status. So take your status. Take your pride. Live in it. Eat it. Sleep in it. Because that is all you have left. My mother, who had been revived by some of the bridesmaids and was sitting in a chair nearby, heard me. She struggled to her feet, pushing away the water glass someone offered her. She stumbled toward me, her hair a mess, her fake pearls askew. Zara, she wailed, reaching out for me. How can you be so cruel? I am your mother. I carried you. She threw herself at my feet, grabbing the hem of my water-stained dress. I am sorry, she screamed. Okay? Is that what you want? I am sorry. I was wrong. I should have listened to you. Just please, please talk to Mr. Vance. She looked up at Julian, tears streaming down her face, her makeup ruining the champagne-colored gown. Mr. Vance, sir, please, she begged. You are a powerful man. You can stop the bank. Please help us. We are good people. We were just tricked. Don't let us lose everything. Zara, tell him. Tell him to help your family. I looked down at her. It was a pathetic sight. The woman who had ruled my life with an iron fist, who had made me feel small and ugly and unworthy, was now on her knees, begging for salvation from the very daughter she despised. But I felt nothing. The well of empathy was dry. I looked at Julian. He hadn't said a word. He had let me handle it. He had let me say what I needed to say.
But now, seeing my mother clawing at my dress, his patience evaporated. He stepped forward, placing himself between my mother and me. He was a wall of black wool and steel resolve. "Mrs. Washington," Julian said, his voice dropping to a register that commanded absolute silence. My mother froze, looking up at him. "Your daughter does not work for you," he said. "She works for me, and I do not pay her to clean up the messes of people who abuse her." "But we are family," my mother whimpered. Julian leaned down slightly, his eyes cold. "You ceased to be her family the moment you sold her heritage to pay for a fraud," he said. "You made a business decision, madam. You liquidated your assets to invest in a criminal. That is not a family tragedy. That is a bad investment. And in the world of finance, when you make a bad investment, you lose." He straightened up and snapped his fingers. Two of his personal security guards, the ones who had been waiting in the wings, materialized instantly. "Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Washington off the property," Julian commanded, "and ensure they do not approach my director again." "No!" my mother screamed as the guards lifted her to her feet. "Zara! Don't let them take us! Zara!" I watched them. I watched my father weeping into his hands as he was led away. I watched my mother kicking and screaming, calling my name not with love, but with desperation. I watched Jasmine sitting on the floor, surrounded by police officers, staring blankly at the spot where her husband had been dragged out. I didn't turn away. I watched until the doors swung shut behind them. The room was quiet now. The guests had started to filter out, whispering and hurrying to their cars, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. The staff was beginning to clear the tables, sweeping up the broken glass and the debris of the disaster. I stood in the center of the empty dance floor, feeling a strange lightness. The heavy weight I had carried for 35 years, the weight of their expectations, their criticism, their rejection, was gone. It had been dragged out the door in handcuffs and tears. I looked at my hands. They were steady. Julian turned to me. He examined my face, searching for signs of regret or collapse. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. I took a deep breath, inhaling the air that no longer smelled of fake lilies and hypocrisy. It smelled of cleaning solution and freedom. "I have never been better," I said, and I meant it. Julian nodded. He checked his watch. "Good," he said, "because we have a lot of work to do. That brownstone isn't going to buy itself back from the bank." I looked at him, surprised. "What?" I asked. Julian smiled that wolfish, knowing smile. "I told you I read the prospectus," he said. "The bank that holds the lien on your grandmother's house, I own a controlling interest in it. I made a call while you were giving your speech. I put a freeze on the foreclosure auction." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, showing me a confirmation email. "The house is safe, Zara," he said. "It is in a holding trust. It is waiting for you." I felt the tears come then. Not tears of sadness, but tears of overwhelming relief. The only thing that mattered, the only piece of my history that was pure, was safe. "You did that for me?" I whispered. "I did that for the best auditor I have ever met," he said, "and because I hate seeing good architecture go to waste." He offered me his arm again. "Now come on," he said. "My driver is waiting. And I believe I promised you dinner at a table where you can actually see the view." I took his arm. I didn't look back at the pillar. I didn't look back at the scene of the crime.
I walked forward out of the ballroom and into the rest of my life. The revolving doors of the Pierre spun me out into the New York night, and the difference in the atmosphere was immediate. Inside the ballroom, the air had been thick with the cloying scent of stale lilies, expensive perfume, and the suffocating weight of centuries of pretense. But out here on Fifth Avenue, the air was crisp and cool, carrying the distinct electric charge of the city. I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs with the smell of exhaust and ozone and wet pavement. It was the sweetest thing I had ever tasted. It tasted like reality. It tasted like freedom. Julian walked beside me, matching his stride to mine. He didn't rush me. He didn't try to fill the silence with empty platitudes about how brave I was or how crazy my family was. He simply existed next to me, a solid, grounding presence in a world that had just tilted on its axis. We walked past the valet stand where guests from other events were waiting for their limousines. I saw a few people glance at us, probably wondering about the woman in the water-stained emerald dress walking with the Titan of Wall Street. But for the first time in 35 years, I did not care about their gaze. I did not care if they thought I was the Help or the Queen of England. I knew who I was. Julian stopped at the curb, raising a hand to signal his driver. A sleek, midnight blue Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up silently from the shadows, gliding to a halt in front of us like a predatory fish in deep water. It was a machine built for power and privacy. The exact opposite of the flashy leased sports cars Hunter used to drive to impress people. Before the uniformed driver could hustle around to open the door, Julian reached out and opened it for me himself. He held the heavy door, looking down at me with those dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through my skin to the bone. "M?" he said, using the endearment naturally, as if he had been saying it for years instead of hours. "How are you feeling?" I looked at him. I could have lied. I could have put on the brave face I had worn for decades, the mask of the strong, independent woman who didn't need anyone. But looking at Julian standing there in the streetlights, with his tie slightly loosened and his jacket unbuttoned, I realized I was done with masks. I was done with performing. "I feel light," I said, honestly, searching for the right words. "I feel like I have been carrying a backpack full of stones up a mountain my entire life, and someone just cut the straps." I looked back toward the hotel entrance, where the faint sounds of chaos were still drifting out. "But I also feel sad," I admitted, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I destroyed them, Julian. I know they deserved it. I know they dug their own graves. But watching my father cry, watching my mother beg on her knees, it is a heavy thing to witness the funeral of your own family while they are still breathing." Julian nodded, understanding etched into the lines of his face. "It is a death," he agreed, soft and low. "You are grieving the family you wanted, not the family you had. You are grieving the potential, the hope that maybe one day they would wake up and see you. Tonight, you killed that hope, and that hurts." He was right. He was surgically accurate as always. "In the house," I added, feeling a fresh wave of pain. "I can live without their approval. I have lived without it for 35 years. But the brownstone, that was different. That was Grandma Dorothy. That was the window seat where I read my first audit report. That was the smell of lavender and old paper. Knowing that strangers are going to walk through those rooms, knowing that a bank is going to auction off the walls that held me when no one else would, that breaks my heart." I looked down at the pavement, blinking back tears. I am happy I found myself, I said, but I am sad I had to lose my home to do it. Julian didn't say anything for a long moment. He just watched me, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. For a second, I thought he was reaching for his flask again, but he pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a digital tablet this time. It was a physical document, thick and creamy paper with a blue legal cover. He held it out to me. "I do not like loose ends, Zara," he said, his voice casual, almost nonchalant. "And I certainly do not like banks taking assets that belong to my partners." I looked at the paper. I looked at him. "What is this?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. "I made a call," Julian said, "while you were giving your speech, while you were dissecting Hunter as fraud on the big screen. I stepped out and called the chairman of the trust that holds the note on the brownstone." He tapped the paper against his palm. "It turns out when you own the bank, you can make certain exceptions to the foreclosure process. I bought the note, Zara. I bought the deed. I bought the arrears. I bought the whole damn thing." My mouth fell open. I reached out with trembling fingers and took the document. I unfolded it under the street lamp. It was a transfer of ownership. But the name on the grantee line wasn't Vance Global. It wasn't an offshore shell company. It was Zara Washington. You bought it for me?" I stammered, looking up at him in shock. "Consider it a signing bonus," Julian said, a small smile playing on his lips. "I need my director of risk management to have a stable home base. I cannot have you worrying about where you are going to sleep when you should be worrying about saving me millions." "But this is millions of dollars, Julian," I whispered. He shrugged, adjusting his cufflinks. "I told you it was a good investment. Good architecture is rare, and loyalty is priceless." He stepped closer to me, his voice losing its business edge and becoming something warmer, something deeply personal. "That house is your history, Zara. It is where you became the woman you are. I wasn't going to let them take that from you. They can take the credit for your success. They can take your patience. They can take your energy. But they do not get to take your sanctuary. Not while I am around." I stood there on the corner of Fifth Avenue, clutching the deed to my grandmother's house, and I felt something crack inside my chest. It wasn't a break. It was a release. For 35 years, I had been the giver. I had been the fixer, the lender, the worker, the invisible support system. I had never been the receiver. I had never been the one who was protected. And here was this man, this stranger turned savior, who had seen my worth in the dark and had moved mountains to restore my legacy. Not because I begged him, but simply because he thought I deserved it. "Thank you," I whispered the words, feeling inadequate. "Julian, thank you." He didn't brush it off. He didn't make a joke. He just nodded, accepting my gratitude with the grace of a king. "You earned it," he said. "Now get in the car. I believe we have a victory dinner to attend, and I am starving." I slid into the back seat of the Rolls-Royce. The leather was soft like butter. The air inside smelled of cedar and leather, a stark contrast to the smell of the trail I had left behind. Julian slid in next to me, closing the door and sealing us in a bubble of quiet luxury. "Two per se, driver," Julian instructed, "and take the long way. We are in no rush." The car began to move, gliding forward with a smooth, silent power. I leaned back against the headrest, clutching the deed to my chest. As the car pulled away from the curb, I couldn't help it. I looked up at the rearview mirror. Through the tinted glass, I saw them. My family was standing on the sidewalk outside the hotel. They were not huddled together in comfort. They were ripping each other apart. My mother was screaming at my father, hitting his chest with her fists, her face contorted in an ugly mask of blame. My father was slumped over, looking defeated, a broken man, with nowhere to go. Jasmine was standing apart from them, arguing with a police officer, gesturing wildly at the hotel as if demanding they let her back in to retrieve her fantasy life. Hunter was gone, taken away in the back of a squad car. They looked small. They looked chaotic. They looked like strangers. For a moment, I felt a phantom pull, a reflex to tell the driver to stop, to roll down the window to offer them money or a ride or a solution. It was the old Zara, the Zara who thought love meant fixing people who didn't want to be fixed. But then I felt the weight of the paper in my hand. I felt the warmth of Juliana's shoulder next to mine. I remembered the pillar. I remembered the pink sticky note. I remembered the laughter when they called me the help. I looked at the image in the mirror one last time. Then I reached up and flipped the little tab on the mirror, tilting the glass upward until the sidewalk disappeared, until my family disappeared, until all I could see was the city skyline ahead of us, bright and open and full of infinite possibility. I turned to Julian. He was watching me, waiting to see if I would turn back. When he saw me adjust the mirror, a slow, proud smile spread across his face. He reached out and took my hand, interlacing his fingers with mine. "Ready?" he asked. I squeezed his hand. "Ready," I said. I looked out the windshield as the car accelerated, merging onto the avenue. The city was a river of light flowing around us. I wasn't in the shadows anymore. I wasn't hidden. I was front and center, moving toward a future that I had built with my own resilience and secured with my own truth. I used to be the girl who sat behind the pillar, afraid to be seen, waiting for crumbs of affection. But as the Rolls-Royce carried me away from the wreckage of my past toward the brownstone that was finally legally mine, I realized something profound. The pillar didn't hide me. It protected me until I was strong enough to step into the light. And now that I was here, with the world spread out before me like a banquet, I knew one thing for sure. I would never sit in the back again. Standing on that sidewalk, with the deed to my grandmother's house in my hand, I realized that for 35 years, I had been waiting for a seat at a table that was rotten to the core. We often spend our lives trying to prove our worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding us. But the truth is, your value does not decrease based on someone else's inability to see it. Sometimes, you have to let go of the hand that is hurting you to grab the hand that wants to help you. I stopped begging for a place in their world and built my own. If you have ever had to choose your dignity over your history, or if you have found the strength to walk away from a toxic situation, please hit that like button and subscribe. Tell me your story in the comments below, because I read every single one.